Good evening. It's a little past 7, and it's time for the local planning agency meeting for April 17th, 2025. We have 3 members, so we have a quorum. I'd like to get a motion to approve the minutes from March 6th. Anybody like to move that?
I'll move that.
Okay, we have a motion, and do you want to second it?
Yeah.
Great.
Yep.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
We have one new piece of business this evening. It is not a quasi-judicial hearing. It's a public hearing to consider the adoption of an ordinance amending Article 12, Division 1, Uniform Redevelopment Standards in the Community Redevelopment Code, Land Development Regulations, and the Martin County Code. This will be presented by Susan Kors and Elise Elder. Ladies, take it away.
Yes, members of the LPA, we're here today to talk to you about an ordinance that's being proposed to change the procedures and requirements for alternative compliance in the community redevelopment areas. So right now, we have a process for alternate compliance. Alternate compliance is if somebody doesn't want to meet the CRA code, they request a deviation from the code. So it's very similar to a variance. Right now, the process is someone can fill out an application, and it goes to the Growth Management Department for review, and then the Growth Management Director makes the decision on whether or not to grant the code deviation. So we've had some issues with that over the past few years. This process was implemented when the CRA was changed. Prior to that, there was a public hearing at the NAC. So since the new process has been implemented, there's been some growing pains. So we're going to propose to make some changes to that. One of the main changes is to really bring it back into the public hearing process, because right now, a neighbor has no idea if alternative compliance is being requested. So instead of having the Growth Management Department evaluate it and the director make a change, the Growth Management Department is still going to evaluate it, but we're proposing that for minor site plans, basically all requests except for major developments that go to the board would be reviewed and decided by the CRA board, because that's a public meeting, neighbors will know about it, and the neighbors will have an opportunity to voice their, whether they're for it or against it, because without the public hearing process, it's been problematic, and Florida law anticipates a public hearing process. The other thing that we are proposing to change is right now, the criteria to ask for alternative compliance, which again is a deviation from the code. And the code is there so everybody knows what to build, but it's also there so neighbors know what is going to be built in their community. So under Florida law, to get a deviation from code, there's a specific standard. The criteria for alternative compliance doesn't really conform with that standard. So we are proposing criteria, and it's in your packet, that mimics Florida law, and it's similar to what we, I don't know if you could bring it up on the screen, Susan. I don't have access to that, but it mimics what we require for the Board of Zoning and Adjustment to grant variances outside of the CRA. So we're making it very similar to that. So right now, the criteria is it may be approved upon a finding of the Growth Management Director that the alternate plan fulfills the purpose and intent of Article 12 as well or more effectively than adherence to the strict requirements of Article 12. So that's not a very, it doesn't give a lot of criteria. So the decisions aren't as easily made because it could be arbitrary. There's just not a good criteria to follow. So what we're proposing is the language that's similar to a variance. So it would, and this is what Florida law requires. So the first thing would be special conditions exist, which are peculiar to the land. Special conditions were not caused by the applicant. The granting of alternative compliance will not confer a special benefit on the applicant. And then strict adherence to Article 12 will deprive a right for the applicant, and that the proposed alternative compliance is the minimum necessary to meet the reasonable use of the property. So we're really just changing it to this, here it is, to this language, so it's more consistent with Florida law. The next section talks about And this alternative compliance process is only going to apply to dimensional and architectural requests. Landscaping requests all throughout the county currently go to the Growth Management Director, and we're going to keep that for the CRA as well. So on the next page, under the next section, which is Section C, you will see that we have a lot of criteria for the alternative compliance for landscaping. We basically mimicked what was in the code for the rest of the county, so it's consistent. And then finally, in Section D, you'll see that what we're proposing for the approver of dimensional and architectural requests is the board for major site plans. Under number 2, it's the CRA for all other requests for dimensional and architectural. And landscaping goes to the Growth Management Director. And in subsection 4, currently in the rest of the county, if it's a very small request, like a dimensional request that's less than 12 inches, it will go to the Growth Management Director because it's very small. So we're keeping that process in place for the CRA as well. And then the rest of the changes you'll see to charts are really just to fix some code provisions that aren't cited correctly. So there's nothing really substantive in that. But that's the reasoning behind, that's the change we're proposing, and the reasoning is just to, it hasn't worked as well. There's been some upset neighbors and some things that, it just hasn't worked. So we're proposing this new change. We actually went to the CRA board, we presented this, and they voted unanimously in favor of it. So previously, it went to the NAC, and I know there's been questions about why it's not going back to the NAC, and there's a few reasons. The first one is the NAC only meets quarterly, and we don't want to bottle up the requests. The other reason is because the NAC is purely an advisory board, and technically, under Florida law, they can't make final decisions for the board. They can't have that authority delegated to them. The CRA is an independent board that makes independent decisions, so that's how we thought the CRA board was a better fit. That summarizes the changes, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
I can provide a little bit more
Yes.
background if that's helpful. Before 2021, the alternative compliance requests, again, followed the same, it always follows the same process. It's an application procedure. The applicant does their application, sends it to Growth Management. Growth Management reviews it, evaluates it, looks at it, does a staff report, and then that report used to go to the NAC. Again, Elise enumerated some of the reasons why that was problematic. They only meet every couple of months, so you're holding up residents, you're holding up developers. That got to be a problem. It's hard for neighbors to judge neighbors, so that was an issue as well. Everybody wanted to abstain. That got to be a problem. They change very often. Those committees are advisory, as Elise described, and they also change often enough. There's usually 5 to 9 members. They're constantly changing. There's constantly new folks. Hard to keep everybody trained, especially on code. So that was a little bit difficult. So those were a lot of the reasons why it really wasn't working. So when we changed the CRA code and went to a more form-based code, and that happened in 2021, with years before all of those changes came to fruition in 2021, in our code, we changed it, taking it out of the hands of the NAC and putting it squarely on Paul Schilling's shoulders. He's such a good sport, he was like okay with that. But, and that's been problematic as well, for some of the same reasons, believe it or not. So Paul would, on occasion, whenever there was, let's say, an issue with it, or we wanted to get a little bit more information from the community, he would send it to the NAC. So the folks on the advisory committees, they weren't seeing most of these applications. And as Elise pointed out, that also kind of interferes with the public process. So we realized that that wasn't really working out either. So we decided that we needed to look at it, especially in light of not being standardized and following the letter of the law. We looked at it again and realized that we had the CRA board who meets once a month, so that kind of takes care of that problem. They are generally on that board for 4 to 8 years at a time. They are fairly well-trained. We are going to provide additional training for them specifically in this arena moving forward, and that they're kind of a level above being somebody's neighbor because they're from all of the different CRA areas. So applications can come in from Golden Gate, and it wouldn't make that big of a difference because everybody on the board is not your neighbor or lives down the block, that kind of a thing. They thought that that was a great idea. We think it'll work better, and it kind of checks all of the boxes that we need to check off. You know, as you guys know, better than most, code is a process, and we keep trying to refine it, so this is our latest revision for alternative compliance.
Any questions for staff? I have probably just a couple. Are the notice requirements for the CRA variances the same as for a variance that somebody might be trying to get for someplace out of the CRAs?
So I know that, and Elise probably is a better person to answer this, we don't notice in terms of put up signs because it's not a code change. But we do have a publicly noticed meeting, the agenda goes out, we do constant contact throughout the county so everybody can see the agenda. You know, it's posted in all of the places it needs to be posted for the public.
So the notice requirements for a variance through BOZA is stricter than in the CRA, and we did that because of the nature of the CRA and the mission behind the CRA. We didn't do it so it's, you know, you have to send letters to all the neighbors. But we will advertise them in the agenda so people have notice of it that way. So they'll be able to see it on the CRA agenda, and then they'll be able to come to the CRA meeting and voice public comment.
Or send an email, they can do it that way as well.
Correct. And it would
Couple of
become-
avenues.
Right. It would become part of the record, just like for these or the board meetings.
And so contemplating taking it to the BOZA board instead, was that considered or not?
So we didn't because BOZA has a separate ordinance and I'm sorry, BOZA is the Board of Zoning and Adjustment, and what they do is they grant variances for setbacks in the county and maybe a few other things, but primarily setbacks. They have their own separate ordinance, and their powers are limited. It's not as wide as the CRA board, and we felt like this felt in the CRA, and because the CRA is a unique area, that the CRA members would understand the needs of that community better. So that's why we picked CRA over BOZA.
And if you recall, Jim, we brought architectural standards to this body as well, and that's one of the things that people can ask for alternative compliance in the CRA for, and so BOZA really has no background in the architectural standards, whereas the CRA does that all the time.
And the largest exception is going to be for landscaping and for plant materials, is that correct?
Well, that's going to go
Straight
to
to
growth
the
management the way it has, yeah.
Right, yes. And that's more dynamic, like you can change out landscaping, but if you give somebody a setback in a building, that's not something that can be changed. So that's, I think, the reasoning behind it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any more questions for staff? There are no members of the public here in the audience, so we can take it for some more discussion or get a motion right away. The motion would be for staff's recommendation.
I'll move, yeah.
Second.
I'll move for that motion, yes.
Okay, we have, yeah, I did not make the motion.
Yes.
All right.
Approve staff.
Right.
Take staff's recommendation.
Great. We have a motion and a second. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, I appreciate you
Paul,
coming
you've
out.
got so much more free time on your hands now. You'll probably want to join a CRA.
Yeah, no, I appreciate, of course, Elisa's, Susan's efforts in all this, because I think ultimately it's going to be, the community is much more intertwined with what's going on down the street or whatever the case is, and it provides for a more uniform standard of those deviations or requests. And I think it may add some time to some things, but ultimately I think it may also cut down on some of the things that maybe we've seen before with respect to just some code
I
change.
mean, if you're getting some complaints, saying whoa is the easiest way to handle the people that have a problem.
Yeah, I mean, just to give you an example, it's neither here nor there at this point, but I do recall an issue with, and I don't remember the particulars, but it was an application, as Susan mentioned, that I suggested be brought up at the NAC, and the NAC took it up and then sent it back to me and said, nothing.
No thumb up, no thumb down.
Yeah, so,
So we were kind of like,
It's hard to be Caesar.
no, just for the benefit of everyone, the development in the CRAs can be challenging, as you know. A form-based code, implementing that on infill developments is always a challenge, and with all the technical issues and code requirements, just generally with development, it can be a challenge at times, and part of this process is intended to facilitate those peculiar instances, those instances where there's something that can't be quite strictly complied with, but in the end result will be development that the community can be proud of and understand the parameters of.
yeah, more difficult to redevelop, when you're trying to do that in an already built environment. Of course, you're going to have those anomalies that there's just nothing you can do about it. You can't change it. So we have to design around it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. When is our next meeting scheduled?
May 15th, we have a couple of items scheduled and advertised, or very close to advertising, so, and I know we've had some instances, the last time we were here, I made an assumption that we weren't having a meeting, and lo and behold, we were having a meeting, and that's my mistake, but if we could just get those responses to that email, and then we can go about all our business, all of us. So I would appreciate, do you guys know you'll be here on the 15th?
I think I will be.
Thank you.
I think I'll be out of town.
Okay, thank you.
I'm pretty sure I'll be here.
Thank you very much.
So at least we have a quorum. No, we don't,
Yes, thank
actually. You're not going to be here. Yeah,
Much appreciated.
thanks.
Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you. Meeting over?
Yeah, shall we disperse? Meeting adjourned.